Today I learned that buddy box doesn't mean a cardboard box filled with VHS tapes that you smuggled out of his mother's basement, full of illicit things that you probably shouldn't have, like bootleg movies and all kinds of other stuff that was recorded from that cable television network that he has. It's all scrambled. Anyway, it doesn't mean that. Even though that's a really old reference, I did say VHS tapes. It means a thing where you can use two radios to control one quad so that you can keep your buddy from beating the crap out of your quad by controlling it with your sticks while he uses your beater extra radio, because that dude's probably a klutz and you don't want to give him your nice stuff. But today I'm going to show you how to do it with absolutely no wires. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and today I am going to show you how to use two ExpressLRS radios to do a buddy box setup where you have a master radio connected to your quad, but you can actually teach a buddy to fly on a completely separate radio without having to plug anything between them or do any other funny business in the field where you're like linked by this 3-foot long audio cable and he just runs off and rips it out every time he crashes in the field. That happens all the time to me. I use this exact setup here to teach my son how to fly quads. He's 5 years old, and he doesn't get the concept that he can't just run off and go pick up the quad every time he crashes like I do, because he's literally tethered to me with a 3-foot cable. I got tired of that crap, and thanks to the ExpressLRS developers, they have just added a feature into ExpressLRS. A little disclaimer though, it's not actually in the most current release. It won't actually be released till version 3.3, but I'm still going to show you how to use it because it's just so darn cool. They've added a feature that lets you select different protocols for the receiver to output instead of just CRSF. Historically, ExpressLRS has just output CRSF, and whatever device you hook it up to has to be able to accept CRSF. That's what we do with our flight controllers, the modules in our radios, all those things. Well, in BetaFlight 3.3, they are merging in a pull request that allows you to pick other things, like S-Bus. And it just so happens that on radios like the Radiomaster TX16S, you can use an S-Bus receiver inside of your radio. I'll show you how to do that. It's not the normal way. To set up a serial buddy box system where another radio using an ExpressLRS module binds to a receiver inside of your handy-dandy TX16S, and then you can use it as a buddy box to transmit to your quad. So today I'm going to go over how to do that with you. Just know, like I said, it's not in the current release. It is in an upcoming release, version 3.3, and I'm going to be showing you how to do this with the master branch in the ExpressLRS configurator, which is an experimental branch. So do not do this unless you want to be on experimental firmware. Just wait till version 3.3 comes out and it'll be part of the official, and you can flash version 3.3 like you would any other version and use the same process. But I'll be using master today. But first we're going to talk about this radio, because at the bottom of this particular radio, there are a couple of weird ports. You see this one with pins here, this one with pins there. Those are fairly special when it comes to radios, because those down there, those are UARTs, just like we have on our flight controllers that go to the MCU inside of this radio, especially the one on the right side with the 5 pins that I just pointed out to you. That one is pretty much there specifically for adding extra features to your radio. Unfortunately, though, that is not a feature of every Radiomaster radio, and so far the TX16S is the only one I found that fully supports that. There may be some other brands that support having a UART down there, like Jumper, especially if they're larger radios like this, but the TX16S definitely has it. So if you have a TX16S, you can absolutely use it as a master radio for the way I'm going to show you. If you have something else, though, it's possible there's a UART hiding on the board somewhere, but it's going to be a big dig. And you did notice I said on the board somewhere, because we are going to shove the ExpressLRS receiver for this buddy box system inside the radio. So let me crack it open and show you how that works. And with the back of my radio open, you can see I have an ExpressLRS receiver here, sticky to taped right to the board and soldered to these pins down here. And this is the diagram for that. Because those pins down there are the inside of the external pins that I showed you earlier. So we're not going to be plugging the receiver into the outside pins. We're actually just going to solder the receiver internally. So when you pick a receiver for doing this, because you will need to get an ExpressLRS receiver to do this, you're going to want to get something with a ceramic antenna or a flat antenna, because the idea is that we're going to cram it inside of here. Lucky for us, the TX16S has a crap load of room inside of it, just extra dead space. So you've got a lot of place to put that. Where I sticky taped mine to is actually a spot that they reserved for a Bluetooth module that never got on the board, and you can totally add yourself, and if you've done that mod, you're not going to have the same spot I did. But I just used some good double-sided VHB, slapped it on the board, put some heat shrink around my receiver, soldered it up like I showed you with the pinout, and got it going. You're not quite done though. It's going to power up, but it's going to go right off when you turn your radio on. There's a couple of things that we need to go do inside the radio software in order to enable that module. And that brings me to the next thing you need to think about for this, which is the receiver is always technically powered on whenever you make the settings change that I'm going to show you to enable it. So every time you want to turn it off, you have to undo these settings I'm going to show you. Otherwise, it's going to sit there and it's going to draw power. And after 90 seconds, it's going to kick into Wi-Fi mode. And then it's going to draw a boatload of power. And then you might burn out your receiver. So, adventuring wonders might, I did not do it, but you totally could if you want to drill a hole in the case of your TX16S. Add a physical power switch in between the power connections, obviously on the hot side of the power connection. You can add a physical power switch if you're willing to drill a hole, and then you can do a power on-off toggle to it, and that's actually a really, really good idea if you want to use the 3 power cycle binding process that ExpressLRS has. For what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn it on and off in the software, and when I'm not using the Buddy Box feature, I just go in there and turn it off. I'm going to show you how to turn it on though, and to turn it off, you just do it the exact opposite way, because you can't do one setting before you do the other. Just trust me, you have to go in the exact opposite direction to turn it off, but you can totally do that on the software. As far as pairing it and flashing it goes, I'm just going to let it handle that by going into Wi-Fi mode on its own. I'll show you that in a minute. So we're not going to use the power cycle thing, so you don't have to do the physical switch. But if you're really brave, you totally can, and let me know in the comments below if you're going to do that, because I really want to, but I don't want to put a hole in my radio. And I feel like a lot of you are going to feel that way. But let me show you how to enable this thing in software on the radio real quick before we do the flashing. And with my radio turned on, I'm going to hit the sys key, and then I'm going to go over to the hardware tab, scroll backwards so I can get to the bottom, go to serial port 1, click that, and I'm going to select Fancy Dancy S-Bus Trainer. That will turn the power on to the receiver. Then I'm going to back out of that, and then go to the model that I'm going to use to connect to the quad. Right now I'm using ExpressLRS because that's what I'm going to use, and I just want to make sure I have that selected. Then I'm going to hit the MDL key, and I'm going to go to the bottom of the first page where it says trainer. See, it says master jack. I'm going to put it on master serial. So now you're in whatever model you would use to connect to the quad. You're going to let your buddy, who is going to touch your other box, fly, because you are going to be physically connected to the quad with this radio, and their radio is going to connect to your radio via the receiver that you have soldered internally. And then it's going to be using the S-Bus Trainer method to send his stick commands, her stick commands, he, she, him, stick commands, whatever pronouns they prefer. Their stick commands are going to go into your radio, out your radio to the quad via the receiver built in. Now, we haven't flashed the receiver yet, obviously. There's still one more step, though, that we need to do just to enable the trainer sticks. And we need to set a special function to allow a switch to turn the trainer on and off. And then we're going to go flash everything, because that's actually the easy part of this process. And to get those last settings done, I'm going to go back into system just to double check some things. I'm going to page over to the trainer tab. You can see I have colon equals 100, channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. And colon equals means that whatever the sticks on the Buddy Box are, it will be exactly that on mine. So even though my stick is at 0, the Buddy Box will be at whatever the Buddy Box is. As long as I have the special function switch I'm going to show you how to set up in a second is enabled, they will have full control. When I click that switch off, the control will be back at my sticks, at whatever position my sticks are at. So if they were at 100% throttle and I click the switch off and my throttle's at 0%, it will be at 0%. So just know that if you need to bail your buddy out of this, you are going to have to be quick on your sticks too. So be prepared to save they butt pretty fast. But it does work really well. And what I found, honestly, most of the time I wind up doing when I'm training my son is I click the trainer on, let him fly. After I have armed the quad, I click the trainer on, let him fly. If he gets into any dangerous situations, I click the trainer off, and I may use the throttle, I may back the throttle down, and then just disarm the quad and go get it. I tend to not like take over mid-flight and fly, but totally up to you. You do what you want. Now we have to set the special function up to start and stop trainer mode and set that to a switch. And to do that, we're back at our model. So I'm going to hit the MDL key and I'm going to go over to the special functions menu. It's very special. I'm going to scroll down to my first available special function. You can see I have a bunch in here already. My first one's SF10. Yours might be whatever number. I have a bunch in here because I have a lot of Bardwell's voice pack stuff playing when I hit switches. So mine just happens to be 10, but yours could be whatever it is, just the first available one. And I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to hit function and I'm going to go down to trainer. Real simple there. Value sticks, yes'em. Then I'm going to go to switch and click switch. Now I'm going to flick the switch that I would like to set. You can see I flicked this switch here and it automatically found SC down. So I'm going to use that because when I'm in this position with this switch, I want the trainer to be active. When I'm not, I don't. And then I hit enable. There you go. And we're good to go. And that's basically all there is to it on the master side. You've got your receiver soldered in and you've got all your stuff set up in your model and the radius hardware config to enable it. Just remember, it's important if you're not going to be using the buddy box that you disable it. And the way you'll have to do that is go into the model and set the trainer port back to master jack. And then you'll have to go back into the hardware tab and set UART1 back to debug. It says debug. That's the default. That will turn power off to the receiver and you won't be wasting power or broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal in there and heating things up. So when you're not using buddy box mode, make sure you do that. And if you get real brave and put a physical switch on the power side, by God, let me know, because I think that's a really cool idea, and I haven't done that yet. But we still have to talk about the buddy side of the so-called buddy box that your so-called buddy is going to be using to destroy your drones. What do you need to do here? Well, I obviously have a second radio, and that's what I'm using for the buddy box, but your buddy might not. Your buddy might have his own radio and doesn't fly ExpressLRS. Totally fine. What I'd recommend here is you set up a model on the second radio, the slave radio, the buddy side of the radio. That's the terminology for this bullcrap. You set up a mode here where you have your sticks in the correct mode for matching your sticks on your master radio. So I fly mode 2. That means I have a profile set up in here for him where the sticks are mapped to mode 2. Pretty easy. As far as the radio side of things go, this is just a cheap, happy model, like first gen ExpressLRS transmitter. And what I did with this is I flashed it, which I'll show you that part of the process here in a minute. And then I popped it into my big radio and I used the Lua script for ExpressLRS to set it to the same packet rate that I'm using on my big radio and down to 25 milliwatts of output power, because that is all you really need for this. You're not going to be 800 feet apart and you don't want to be blasting a ton of ExpressLRS into the ether. So 25 milliwatts is perfectly fine for this. I recommend that you do that with the big radio because your buddy might not have ExpressLRS, he might not have the Lua script, or he might be running a totally different version. And if you do this right, all you need to do is pop this module into the back of his radio if you don't already have a buddy box dedicated radio, and then set his model to export CRSF to the external port. And then he could actually fly your quads without doing a whole lot of things as long as he flies mode 2. Totally awesome. Now you might be thinking, this is getting awful expensive, Bacon. Talking about a transmitter and a radio and a receiver, it's not really that bad. The receiver, $15. This can be had for less than 50. And you can find a lot of used TX12s that were foreign ones on the interwebs. So you could probably do this whole thing for $100 and get someone in the air. Now, that same $100 could be spent on a really nice radio for them on its own, but you won't be able to train them with it unless you plug in cables, and it's not very versatile. I can throw this in my bag, take it out to the flight line, and any other pilot that has a radio, and I don't want to hand my radio over to them to fly my quad, I can totally do that without having to do the whole bump and uglies thing of ExpressLRS loan your model feature or whatever that is. This is so much easier and I can keep them from crashing. But now that we've got that out of the way, it's time to go build the firmware for our ExpressLRS receiver that we have permanently installed in our TX16S. And again, as a reminder, I'm going to be using the master branch, not the official branch, because this is not in the official release yet. It will be in the official release. It is marked for version 3.3 with the handy dandy little thumbs up or pizza icon or something, whatever they're using on their GitHub page. It will be in that feature release, but it's not yet, so I'm using master. So really the only difference here is instead of official releases, you're going to click the one right next to it for Git branch. You're going to go in the pull down and you're going to hit master. And then just like any other ExpressLRS receiver you've ever flashed, because you would be flying ExpressLRS already, if you're doing this, you will just pick your stuff for the model and the make and all the settings you want. Now, one thing you should remember here, you'll need to make sure you check this invert TX option. It's very important in the settings. And do not use the same binding passphrase for this setup that you use for your quads. Because whenever you start up this receiver, if your radio's powered on, which it's going to be powered on, it's the same radio the receiver's in, it will connect itself to the receiver. So do not do that. What I recommend you do is you have a separate bind phrase in the module you plan on using as a buddy module, and you use that same bind phrase in this receiver. So come up with something totally different that does not interfere with your current bind phrase. Trust me, I did it wrong the first time and I felt real stupid. So don't repeat my mistakes. But basically, other than that, you just run through the whole flash process and build it. As far as flashing it onto the radio though, that's not any harder either. Just do what I showed you to start it up, power it up, let it set through the default waiting for Wi-Fi stuff, which is 90 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds. It may depend on how you flashed it if it's a pre-flashed receiver. And then just flash it over Wi-Fi. Totally simple. Are you with me? You've done this before probably if you're doing this. Hopefully you have. If not, I have a whole video on how to Wi-Fi flash ExpressLRS, and all of this applies to it. So if you haven't ever done it before, I'm going to link that video in the description below. Now that we're done building the firmware and we have flashed it onto the module in the radio, what about this side? Nope, it's not any different. So all you need to do here is switch from the Git branch page back to official releases and pick a version of 3.2 to flash to this transmitter. Just remember, you've used a different binding phrase, right? On the receiver, you did use a different binding phrase, right? I told you to do that because my stupidly self bound my radio to my radio, and I don't want you to do the things that I've done because I learned from those things that I've done and now I'm passing them on to you. Hence the whole purpose of making this video. Yes. But now I need to call Bacon from the future to give us an important message about the future. Hi, I'm Bacon from the future, and my eyes are really wide. Don't ask. It's an industrial accident. It just happened. I don't want to explain it. The lawsuit's still pending. All I need to tell you is that if version 3.3 of ExpressLRS has already released officially, then you don't have to do this whole thing with the Git branch and picking the master, because it will already be in there. All the things you need will be in 3.3. So just flash your receiver and flash your transmitter with 3.3 or greater. That's it. Don't ask about my industrial accident. The lawyers are still working on it. I'm going to hand it back to Bacon now. And that's more than enough of that weirdo. Out of here with that crap. Now that we've got our receiver flash that's inside of our master radio, and we have the transmitter flashed on our buddy's radio, technically they should pair together because you've used that same binding phrase that I keep talking about that is different from your primary binding phrase. So if we started up the buddy's radio and then we started up the module, the receiver inside of our TX16S using the turn on, turn off settings in the menu that I showed you earlier, they would technically bind. Yes, absolutely they would. But now it's time to enable the coolest part of this whole thing, which is super understated, by the way. The ExpressLRS devs that worked on this little feature that was super requested by a very small percentage of users to be able to support native output of S-Bus from ExpressLRS receivers when they have always been CRSF. It is no small feat to have done. And they took the time to do it just because it was so requested for people that want to fly planes or anything else where they don't have a UART, or older flight controllers that only had 2 UARTs, but they also want to use GPS, so they have an S-Bus pad. You can totally use it to put S-Bus into your flight controller. Now, anyway, I'm going way off subject here. We need to enable the feature that allows the receiver to output S-Bus, because if you remember back to those settings I told you about, we're enabling S-Bus trainer on that UART, so we can't enable CRSF trainer. It doesn't work that way. We need S-Bus. So what we're going to want to do is go to the hardware page of your radio like I showed you before, turn on that part in the UART that says S-Bus Trainer. That will power up the receiver in your radio. Then we're going to let it sit there until the Wi-Fi kicks on, which you're just going to have to keep checking your Wi-Fi networks because you can't see the light anymore. It's inside the radio. That's one other downside to this. Until you get it, then you're going to want to connect to that receiver and go to the web page just like you were flashing it. And in that web page, you're going to want to find this pull down, and you're going to pull it down and select S-Bus. And then you're going to save it. And now suddenly your ExpressLRS receiver outputs S-Bus. That's it. So you've got your buddy's radio with the transmitter on it. You start this thing up. You start up your TX16S, handy McDandy. Then after everything's booted up, you turn on the S-Bus Trainer function in the hardware page of the TX16S. Then you go to your model settings and you go down to the very bottom and you enable master serial for the trainer port. And you're ready to go. You're ready to flick your switch after you arm your quad, hand over control of your nice, fancy, expensive baby to your buddy. But at least now you can disarm it when he decides to do something stupid, and then you can turtle it and fly it home and charge him for whatever the damage is, without totally losing your quad or obliterating it or whatever. It's a very big safety feature, and you no longer have to be tethered by a really thin umbilical cord to your so-called friend. Or in my case, my son, which I wasn't physically tethered to him, but his mother was, so maybe she should train him. Anyway, besides the point, you're totally done. Your wireless trainer via ExpressLRS on 2 separate radios is done, and I hope you enjoy it. Go to the comments below and let me know how you plan on using this, and definitely let me know if you're going to do the whole thing with a power switch on the receiver, if you're okay with cutting a hole or a slot in your TX16S's case, because if you are, it might give me the courage to do it, and I kind of want to do it because I want to be able to flick the switch on and off instead of doing the whole software on-off thing. You see how janky that can be. That is a janky part. There's a lot of janky parts here, but you don't have to use a cable. And even if you used a cable, you would still more than likely have to go in and make some software settings changes to get it to work every time. It can be a real pain. So, yeah, I hope you train your buddy, and I hope you get him to fly with you, and I hope that if he's already flying with you, you can show him a thing or two from your master radio. That's all I have for you. Until next time, stay greasy, and I'll catch you later. Stop it with the hands, Bacon. You don't need to express everything with your greasy fingers. People don't want to see this. I feel like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands. And we gave it our best. We raced real good. No.